Mom? Mom? Ray?
You know, Zoom can take eavesdropping to new levels.
We're going to give it another few moments until we start, just allowing a few people to still enter the room. We'll probably start about 6:05.
Make that 10:05 for South Africans.
Okay, Shalom Aleichem, everybody. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam shehakol niya b'dvareh. L'chaim, l'chaim. A very warm welcome. Start locally. Firstly to my dear colleague, Reb David, Rabbi Friedman. My dear colleagues, just over the bridge, out in South Africa, Rabbi Yossi Goldman, Rabbi Yehuda Stern, so many wonderful and beloved congregants in both these two outstanding and dynamic shuls, Sydenham and Central. You know, I had a phone call from Rabbi Yossi a few weeks ago. It was late at night, and we had a very special conversation. And in the course of the conversation, Rabbi mentioned to me that wouldn't it be nice if we can get the two communities to come together one evening and one morning, and we would chat a little bit about the things that are facing us as a Jewish people these days, the challenges that each of us are currently going through. What are the things that we find are helping? What are the things that can work even better? The truth is that Sydney and Johannesburg, or for that reason, Australia and South Africa, have a very strong link. There's something very unique, something that bonds both of our communities in perhaps ways that no other countries experience. At least I'm not familiar with another two countries that have such a strong link. In addition to, of course, to the fact that so many have family, beloved friends who live between these two communities, between these two countries. Many of us are split. Our hearts are half here and half there. We have parents in South Africa. We have children here in Australia, or vice versa. I have to say that even just last night, I had a phone call from a woman in my community, Audrey Kaplan, and I want to take the opportunity to wish her blessings for long life. She's living here. Her three siblings are living in Johannesburg. Her father passed away over Shabbos, and she's here in our community mourning alone. The Levaya is taking place literally in 2 hours in a community in Johannesburg. And it was really, to me, just a reminder of another experience, of another week where families who live here and live there at times like this can't be together. I know that there are bigger things in the world that have happened to us as a people, but it is very trying and it is very hard at times like this when we can't be together. So Sydney, Johannesburg, South Africa, and Australia have so much that we go through as a people, as a family, as a Jewish community. We thought it would be appropriate to spend some time tonight together with all of our beloved congregants, and perhaps towards the end, open it up in the chat for questions. I should say that on a personal note, this is going back almost a quarter of a century. In 1997, when my wife Chani and I were chosen to go as shluchim of the Rebbe to Australia, we were going to be living in Perth, where we went in 1997, 1998, early January of 1998. And we were young. We were in our early 20s, 22, 23 years old. We had never, of course, had the opportunity to serve as a rabbi in a rebbitzin. And it was of such a tremendous blessing to have had the opportunity, b'hashgacha pratis, we were at that point living in New York, to have bumped into Rabbi Yossi Goldman, who I have known growing up as a young boy and a teenager. He was one of the giants who our young, aspiring Talmudic students, Bachrim, yeshiva students, and hopefully one day Rabbonim aspired to follow in his footsteps. He was in New York at the time, and I asked him if it would be okay if we came over that one evening to have a chat with him. My relationship with Rabbi Goldman goes back many years, much before that conversation, because of a family connection. And I remember it like yesterday, sitting in his mother, Zozi Hobenai Lichtige Ganeden, in her dining room, in his father's home, Reb Shimon Goldman and Esther Goldman. My parents were still till today consider the Goldman family mamish like mishpacha. We even used to call Esther Auntie Esther. My grandfather, Vasholem, Reb Ephraim Wolf, would very often stay there when he would come from America. But I remember sitting in that dining room, in the living room of the dining room, and I remember the conversation I had and the wisdom in Rabbi Goldman's words. And I can even, if I remember correctly, there was an analogy that Rabbi Goldman gave me at the time, gave us, Chani and I at the time, which still stays with me till this day. And he said, you know, so often a rabbi thinks that a good sermon is what's really going to make it or break it. And really, it's all about having really that great drasha on a Shabbos or that great drasha on a Yom Tov. And he said the best sermon, and I quote, this is almost 25 years ago, the best sermon is like standing on top of the Empire State Building and throwing down a Panadol or a Tylenol, as he used then, and hoping that it falls down and happens to fall into the mouth of somebody who happens to have a headache at that moment. It's almost as much chance of having that impact when you give a good drasha. He says the way to have a connection, the way to have a true influence on your community is to have a relationship with your people, to have them over in your home, to sit at your Shabbos table, to sit at your Yom Tov table. And it was actually those words, Rabbi Goldman, I should say to you today, it was those words that inspired Chani and I to take on the resolution, the practice that every single family in our shul that would have a simcha, a bar mitzvah, a wedding, in the weeks prior to that simcha, they would be at our Shabbos table so that we can spend some time with them and engage with them and get to know each other, have a l'chaim with them. A warm bowl of cholent goes a far, long way. And I hope and pray that I think those things have really helped us over these years. Anyways, it's a long introduction, but I want to say that it's a privilege to be able to be today on a panel together with Rabbi Goldman, with Rabbi Stern, who I've gotten to know over the years. We've spent some time at different rabbis' conferences in New York, chatting, and over the years, there are members in my community here that have moved to South Africa under your beautiful and wonderful care, who they speak so highly of you, Rabbi Stern. And recently, there's been a momentous moment where we watched how Rabbi Goldman has handed over the reins to Rabbi Stern and Mir Hashem to take him over in the immediate future. And tonight, they both share the podium here, the virtual podium, the panel with my very dear colleague, Reb David. Even though Reb David is today at the shul already after his years of retirement, Reb David has really been thrown right back into the work. And Rabbi Friedman, to all those members from Central Synagogue, know he's one of the most beloved colleagues you can ever ask for. I've learned from here. I've learned so much from him. I hope maybe there's one or two things that he might have learned from me over the years, but I certainly have learned a tremendous amount from him. And it's truly a privilege to be able to have him as a colleague and serve together in the shul. So what we're going to do is, I think I'm going to ask Rabbi Goldman to steer some of the questions and to have a conversation between us four. And then as we go along, I'm sure other things will come up. And hopefully, as I said earlier, we can even have the opportunity for people to put things in the chat box on the side, and we can go to that and hopefully address those things in time.
Thank you, Rabbi Levi, for that beautiful, warm, personal introduction. And indeed, I do remember spending time with you in my parents' house in New York. It was in the lounge, in the living room. And I remember distinctly that you had so many questions and you were so eager to learn. And it was very late at night and the questions didn't stop coming. Must have been about midnight. I actually had to ask you to, I have to apologize that I'm conking out, you know. You would have gone all night. But you soaked it all up, and Baruch Hashem, it was my privilege to have guided and mentored someone as successful as you. And congratulations, I hear you're about commemorating 20th anniversary at the Central Synagogue. That's quite an achievement. I don't know how many other rabbis of your predecessors made it that long, because they've been none. I know that I watched the transitions there. There were quite a few rabbis over the years. So that you've 20 years chalked up, that's a particular achievement. And Mazel Tov, congratulations to you. And please God, Mechayel Choyel from strength to strength. Mm-hmm. And indeed, our families do go back a long way. So you can see, everybody, you can see who's the real technical genius in this group. It's Rabbi Yehuda Stern, my colleague, who's the only one who got the scenery of our shul to be his background. I got my study, and the other rabbis have their studies, but Rabbi Stern is really jacked up, and he's got the virtual background of the iconic Sidnim Shul, where I have now spent nearly 35 years.
I'm actually on the beach, and we just put the study behind.
Yeah, you look dressed for the beach in the winter. It's wonderful to see. I looked through all the pages here. Nearly 200 devices. So there's hundreds of people here on both continents. And of course, I don't know everybody, but it was very touching to see not only our own congregants from Sydenham and Johannesburg, but many ex-South Africans who are living in Sydney today, and many, many familiar names and faces as I scanned the grid. And it's beautiful to see all of you. Too many to mention by name. So welcome one and all from Johannesburg and Sydney, from Sydenham Shul and Central Synagogue. I have had the pleasure of speaking in the Central Synagogue on my visits to Australia over the years. Rabbi Wolf was kind enough to invite me to give a Shabbos drosha there and to speak for your, was it Studio Central, the young adults dinner on a Friday night. I had to speak about love and marriage to young adults. I was much younger then, so I could speak about such things, you know. And Rabbi David Friedman, it's a pleasure to meet you.
Likewise.
So, we look forward to meeting in person one of these days.
Thank you. Same.
And this is one of the benefits of Zoom, that we can all be together, which to do this physically and personally in the traditional way would not be possible. And here, thanks to the technology of Zoom, we're able to join congregations, to join rabbinates. And it's a beautiful idea. It's the first time we're doing it. We've had many guest rabbis over the Zoom period on our pre-Kabbalat Shabbat events and other events, lots of guest speakers from around the world, which makes it much easier. But this is the first for us of two shuls joining forces. And who knows, maybe it'll start a new trend. And maybe more people will do this. And because we can always learn from each other. And
Goldman, just to jump in for a moment.
Sure,
when I was growing up in Melbourne, I grew up in Melbourne, for those who aren't aware, in the 80s and 90s, until my family made Aliyah to Israel. And when I would visit Sydney as a young boy, for some reason, the accent sounded different in Sydney than it did in Melbourne. Now, I thought, you know, Australia is Australia. Why are the Sydney people sounding different to the Melbourne people? Until I figured out that much of the accent that I was listening to was actually South African accents in Sydney at the time. And no wonder the accent sounded slightly different. Anyway, after spending now the last 14 years in Johannesburg, my family now tells me that I sound South African. So just shows you how the two accents are quite interchangeable. The Americans seem to hold on to their accents quite well after 20, 30, 40 years. But the South Africans and the Australians seem to merge quite well, the different accents.
Well, I'm not sure about the British, but I will say this. It's interesting because I haven't seen both of yours, Yossi and Yehuda. I haven't seen your complete CVs, but I think I'm the only of the four of us that I've served both Australian communities and South African community. Of course, I say that with a little bit tongue in cheek because my South African community in St. Ives here in Sydney was about 90% South African expats. So for me, it was just like being in Johannesburg or Cape Town, Durban or Pretoria. But I will just say a big thank you to you. I've put a suit on a Sunday evening. I think this is the first time in 18 months that I've had a suit on a Sunday night. So Toda Rabba. And if I can, just on a very personal note, we've got mechatonim around the world. We've got mechatonim in London, and they're not on Zoom. But I've got mechatonim on the North Shore of Sydney, and Judy and David are on. And I've also got mechatonim in Johannesburg, and Beulah and Mark Hyman, they're on. So I just want to put a little grus to my mechatonim. As you say, Zoom, COVID has been terrible, but some of the products of COVID have been quite positive. And certainly this connecting with people around the world, suddenly a lot of Rabbonim are global stars because of their Zoom talks, because of their drashot that have been printed and sent overseas. So I think we have to see the positive side as well as, very sadly, the very negative side of ill health amongst so many people.
I just want to add one thing. Firstly, just talking about South Africans, and I in many ways experienced something very similar. You know, we're living here in Australia, but the impact and the contribution that South African Jewry has had to Australia, unfortunately, in many ways, to the loss of South African Jewry, is I don't think it's unparalleled to anything we've seen in this generation. When Chani and I, in 1997, moved to Perth, we were living there for 3.5 years before we came here to Sydney. Our entire community, this was the Naranda community, Northern Suburbs Hebrew congregation, Chani and I were the only non-South Africans there. There were no Australians there. We weren't Australians yet. We were still Americans. We only became Australians later on. The entire community was South African Jewry. And Friday night, because of that, was huge, was like in an American shul, what Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur was. And all of a sudden we walked into shul on Friday night and it was unbelievable. And in many ways, they have changed what Australian Jewry has become today. And the Warmkeit and the tradition and the richness of what South African Jewry has brought to Jewish communities around the world is really something to be written about this century. I can see a lot of heads agreeing with me here, but I think that has a lot to do, of course, with the Litvish backgrounds, where they came from, and how Yiddishkeit was really part of their DNA, and a lot with the Rabbonim and the leadership of Yiddishkeit in South Africa. And so anyways, Rabbi Goldman, take it away.
Well, that's actually, I was going to talk about that, and I'm glad you raised it because it's nicer coming from you than from me. But I don't know, I can't remember what year it was, but it's quite some years ago, my first trip to Sydney, I was invited to be a speaker at a big dinner in the Sydney Convention Center, and both Kevin Rudd and Malcolm
Turnbull.
Help me out. Turnbull were both speakers on the program. So I met two of your prime ministers at the one Jewish dinner, and they were each trying to outdo themselves in throwing in Yiddish phrases in their speech. Then when I got up, I quoted a Gemara, and I said, perhaps Kevin or Malcolm would like to translate the Talmud for us. So everybody had a good laugh. But the point is that I attended then also a meeting of the Rabbinical Council of Sydney, and all the rabbis were thanking me for sending the South Africans to Sydney because they did raise the bar, because we might not be the frummest community, but we are certainly, arguably, one of the most traditionally minded Jewish communities in the world. And we have surveys and statistics that in South Africa, maybe 40% of people claim to go to shul once a week. Whether they do or not remains a question, but at least they claim to do it, which is also something. And only buy kosher meat and so on and so forth. So we are a very, very strongly traditional community, and shul going in particular, so that even people who are not religious, strictly religious, still are shul goers. In America, for example, Rabbi Wolf, you and I as Americans will know that in America, if you're not religious, you don't go to shul. But in South Africa, you don't have to be religious to go to shul. And so then the rabbis thanked me for sending all the South Africans to Sydney, and I said, don't thank me, because I actually told them not to emigrate, but they didn't listen. But if they have helped raise the bar of Yiddishkeit in Sydney, then it's our privilege to have made that contribution. So what's unique about our two shuls is that the times they are changing. And we are the traditional big shuls of yesteryear. And we live in a generation now where there's been a proliferation of much smaller shuls, shtibbles, and a minyan in a house, and you can have. When I started at Sydenham back in 1986, we were the only shul for a couple of kilometer radius, and today, Rabbi Stern, how many we got? There must be
almost every second block.
There must be a dozen or more in a kilometer radius. So things, nothing is static, and yet we are, thank God, strong in our big mainstream congregational life, and there's certainly a need for it, and certainly the big bulk of the community is still that way inclined. And how do we see it going? How do we see the role of big shuls going forward today, tomorrow, into the future? And I think here we have two of the great big shuls of these two proud countries, of South Africa and Australia. And let's unpack that a bit and let's see what's going. Now, I'm going to introduce Rabbi Stern, because Rabbi Yehuda Stern has just recently completed a master's degree, and his theme was on something along the lines of age-specific shuls, because young people seem to want to be with their peers. Whereas one of the bylines of our shul is that we are a family shul where every Jew is welcome. And in our kinds of shuls, whether Central or Sydenham, it is very common to see three generations sitting together, a Zayda, a father and a grandson, or Baba, daughter and granddaughter, sitting together in shul. To me, that's the most beautiful thing to see, the generations davening together. But today there seems to be a movement amongst young people that they want to be age specific. They want to be with their own mates, not only for the bracha, for the kiddush, or for a Friday night dinner, but even to daven. So I think Rabbi Stern is very equipped and qualified to talk to begin this conversation.
So I've been the rabbi at Sydenham for focusing on the shtibel, actually, which is the alternative minyan at Sydenham, with an extra focus on the younger generation. But one thing, stepping into my new role as rabbi and together with Esti as Rebbitzin of the Sydenham community, we thank Rabbi Goldman and Rachel for the amazing transition and trust that he has given us in leading the community forward. There's definitely something that a big shul carries, and which the shtibels can't accomplish. And that is that we are shuls for every type of Jew. no matter where a person sees themselves on the spectrum of Jewish observance, there's a place for you in the big shuls. What often happens in the smaller shuls is that it's very, very focused on a particular demographic, whether it's an age demographic, whether it's a religious demographic. That's normally the style of the particular small shul. Now, while the small shul has an advantage because it's maybe more intimate and people feel more at home, and they know each other by first names, and they can relate and celebrate each other's simchas and commemorate each other's losses. But at the same time, there's a large crowd of the community that are not feeling part of that vibe, of that environment, because they don't fit in and they don't feel part of that demographic. And this is the role that we carry, is that having a big shul enables us to be a beautiful family of so many different types of people. We here in South Africa, we fall under the banner of the UOS, the Union of Orthodox Synagogues. I think it's by Friedman, that's a model from the UK, right?
Yeah,
there they call it something different.
Yeah, the United Synagogue.
United Synagogue, right? So here we call it the UOS. And there's something very powerful about that, bringing so many different types of Jews into our community. And just recently, I was having that conversation with one of our members of our shul, how we are so diverse. We've got members that attend the daily minyan religiously, morning and evening. We've got members that attend Friday night services religiously, but once a week on a Friday night. And we have members who attend, like you, I'm sure, in Central, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur religiously, once or twice or 3 times a year. And that's the beauty of these large shuls. And we have to work hard in making sure that we are relevant. The same thing applies to age groups, because many of the smaller shuls cater specifically for a specific age demographic, where large shuls have the responsibility of being family shuls and making sure that we are remaining relevant to the different age groups. I think we had it down to maybe get back to that conversation of the age groups down the line, but I'm happy to hand it over to my colleagues from Sydney.
Can I just come in and say one of the main differences that I found when I went from both my English experience and then my initial Sydney experience coming into Central, and it wasn't planned, and it was, I just happened to meet the president of the shul at the time. We got on very well, and then of course I knew Rabbi Levi pretty well, but of course our relationship blossomed, and it's been just for me, without doubt, the best part of my professional career have been the last 11 years or so. And that doesn't take away anything that I got out of my first 2 appointments, but it's just been every day a delight. But I think that a couple of differences, firstly, is that when you're in a smaller shul, and a smaller shul, my first shul went up to 600 families, and the last one up to about 400 families, is that you're there on your own. You might have a youth rabbi, you might have a part-time chazan in the background, but otherwise, you're the man, you're the kolbo, and people like you, or you know what, they don't like you. They like your style, they don't like your style. I think the first thing that I found when I joined Central, and the amazing thing is I'm the oldest of the 4 in age, but I'm the youngest of the 4 in joining the team. And I'll never forget a conversation around our Shabbos table with our chazan Shimon. And somebody who was not a member of our shul said, what's been the best time for you, Shimon? He'd been involved in our shul for over 40 years. Best time in Central Synagogue. And he turned around and said, right now. And I imagined he said that because the people in earlier years who were immigrants from Eastern Europe, still suffering greatly from the Shoah, the South African crowd had not yet really arrived and made an influence, etc. It was a wealthier shul now than it was maybe 30, 40 years ago. So I thought that was the angle. And he turned around and he said, no, not that at all. He said, we've got 4 clergy, 4 Klei Kodesh, and we all like each other. We all work well together. Nobody's jealous of anybody. And this is the best time that I've ever worked in this shul. So, and that is really, it made me feel very good because I was the last one in. So I sort of squared it off. But it's absolutely true. It comes, I really believe, same with the principal of a school, it always comes from the leader. We've got a great leader in Rabbi Wolf, but I think that's the first thing. You've got You've got a number of different people. Some people are attracted to one person's style, somebody else the other. The other difference, if I may say, between ourselves and South Africa, from my experience of St. Ives, being mainly an expat community, is that most of the South Africans, there were a few exceptions, but most of the expat South Africans were South African stroke Lithuanian. In the same way, if you go to London, most of the Jews, there were some German extract, but on the whole, they were Polish, Russian. But if you come to Sydney, and you particularly come to our shul, you've got New Zealanders, Israelis, Russians. You've got obviously a huge bank of Hungarian and Eastern European. And then, of course, now you've got this new wave, an important, impressive wave of South Africans. So that's another sort of area where we're dealing with different groups, and they're not leveled on religious or age, but just on their ethnicity, if you like, their Jewish ethnicity.
I might just add one. First of all, thank you for those very generous words, Rabbi Friedman, and I reciprocate them. I think it has to do with the team. One of the things I've learned early in my years at shul was that you have to know your own personal strengths and your own personal talents. And then what you need to do is get yourself a team of people around you who can complement you because of the strengths that they have that you don't have. And if you're looking for people who are going to be like you, or you're looking for people who are going to be yes men, who are always going to say yes to the things that you think, then what's the point? It's just an extension of yourself. And I think one of the beautiful things about our team is that we're quite diverse. We come from different places and we think differently. And that's what's really created a very special and dynamic team within our shul. But to add to this idea, I mean, one of the things I was very challenged with, because I never grew up in a big shul. I mean, the biggest shul I knew was 770, which was where the Rabbi davened, and it was a very different model. There was no sort of, so to speak, rabbi and gaboyim and all that. And the shuls that I davened in were Hamish little shtibbels. And when I came to Central, even though I'd spent already 3.5 years in Perth, where there were a community of close to 500 families, it was nothing like the 1,200 families we have at Central. And I think that one of the things that, of course, stand out in a large shul, the first thing is it can lack a sense of personal warmth when there's such a big community, when everybody's there. There's just so many people, where I remember introducing people to one another, and they said, "Where do you daven?" And they both said Central. And I said, "What do you mean? You daven at the same shul? You don't even know each other." Turns out one davens, at that side of the room, and there's another 1,000 men, and they daven on the entire other side, so they didn't get to know each other. They didn't even know they daven belonged to the same shul. And one of the things I've sort of emphasized is create small community experiences within the large shul, because I exactly as Rabbi Stern mentioned, there's something very powerful about a large shul. Something, I mean, it's just you're taken in by the grand beauty and the unbelievable. It transcends yourself. You come, it feels like a real Beis Hamikdash. Especially when you come to large shuls like Siddim and Central, you stand there, if people who come to shul for the first time, you watch them for the first hour, they're just looking and looking. They're just taken in by the enormity of it. But then when you want to get tachlis, and you want to really touch, get moved, get impacted, you need to zoom in. And one of the things that we've done, I think quite well at the shul, is that we've created, once a month. Of course, during the week, it's easy, but even once a month, when we have, big crowds that come to shul on Shabbos, we've created, after the Kiddush, a sit down, we call it a fabrengen or whatever you want to call it, but, just a sit down where 100 people, 150 people sit down and share a few words. And, oh, so that's who that person is. That's what they talk about. That's the questions that are on their minds. That's where they come from. You got to create personal encounters within this large structure, so that people are feeling like their voices can be heard and they get to know each other. And that's really what a real community is. So that you have, from one side, this grand beauty, but on the other hand, you also have that shtibel mentality which is really talking to people. And I think we have to reinvent ourselves. I mean, this is a year, if there's ever been a year that's really taught us to have to learn how to reinvent ourselves, it's been Corona. I mean, the Jewish people experienced the biggest reinventing after the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, where our rabbis realized that the central point is no longer going to be there. And all of a sudden, we created synagogues where people can come to and where they can serve God and they connect to Hashem. And then what happened now over the last 18 months or 2 years has all of a sudden really challenged us in ways I don't think any of us have ever experienced. All of a sudden, what we've always been accustomed to, people are always coming and people are always just, arriving for their simchas, coming for Shabbos, coming for a moment. Now, all of a sudden, we have to become relevant in a whole different way. And this is a time, what was it Churchill who said, a pessimist sees the problem in every opportunity, and the optimist sees an opportunity in every problem. We've had a major problem, but I think there's an unbelievable opportunity here. Yiddishkeit and what shul means is now being reinvented. And if it's a big house or it's a small house, if it's a shtibel or if it's a sidnim or a central, whatever it is, our entire training is thrown out the window. And we have you guys are very lucky. You reopened last week. But we thought we had been the smartest in the entire world. I remember last year creating a social media post, and I turned to my community and I said, this is the largest shul. We're allowed to have up to, I think it was 750 people, and that was less than half of what we're allowed to have capacity. And we should fill the shul up, and we did. We started getting 300 people in shul and 400 people in shul, and simchas were starting to happen. And we thought we dodged a bullet. This is it. We were doing well. And all of a sudden, here we are. Who would have imagined? And now we're on the brink of high holidays, and it doesn't look like we're probably going to be able to be in shul. So how do we relate to our communities? How are our people, who many of us, like Siddur, they connect to Yiddishkeit on high holidays? How do we relate to them? And this is going to be a really big, interesting one.
Can I ask our South African colleagues? It looks at the moment as if Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and probably Sukkot as well, we're going to be in our homes as we were for not this year, but last Pesach. Were you locked down last Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur? Because we did have experiences, but this year, what are we going to do? We'll find open spaces to blow shofar. Are we still going to get our bar minim coming in? I mean, there's a whole range of questions. Did you experience this last year? What was your story on Yamim Noraim last year?
We were open, but with severe limitations. And actually between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the lockdown levels were somewhat lessened.
Relaxed.
Eased, yeah. So Rosh Hashanah was rough. We could only have a 2-hour service. Now our services are normally 5.5 hours on the Rosh Hashanah.
I think that's one thing that all of our congregants are now going to really want is shorter services, right? Look at all those heads.
It's going to be hard to go back to the old one.
Our congregants were sending our government thank you letters for that rule.
We called our services. We had last year a maximum of 350, and we had 4 kol nidres, and then we had 4 musafs and 4 ni'ilas. And we call them power services. And we really worked hard on being able to create an hour and a half, hour and 40 minutes, I think, with David, something like that. Yeah. And everything was shorter, including the rabbi.
And we had the additional service down at Point Piper that all ran.
Yes.
So we'd had satellite minyanim off-site because we couldn't do them on-site because of government regulations. But as I say, this year, I think we're in a new situation.
So we were open for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, but with very strict limitations, and we had multiple services, 4 different services happening simultaneously, and then we did it again, perhaps with a more power service, as you say. I remember, and then Kol Nidre, we could have more people, and it didn't have to be 2 hours. And I remember after finishing the whole thing, we did another service just for Yisker. To those who couldn't make it or we couldn't accommodate, they came in just for Yisker. And Rosh Hashanah, I think I worked harder last Rosh Hashanah than I have in my life, going all over to different streets and gathering people together to blow shofar, people who could not come to shul. And about 6 months ago, when we had a meeting between the rabbis and our leading medical experts, we are fortunate in South Africa that some of the top medical experts in the COVID speciality are actually members of our community and shul-going, observant doctors. And when one of them said he's not sure what next Rosh Hashanah, if it'll be very different, I was shocked. I thought by this Rosh Hashanah, surely we'll be out of the woods. And here we are again. And it looks very much like we're going to also have strict limitations. We'll be open, please God, but certainly with limitations. We're going to have to do the same type of alternative arrangements that we did last year.
Rabbi Friedman mentioned Kir Shofar, blowing of the shofar, which obviously is that moment that the entire congregation gathers to, and in the large shuls, as Rabbi Wolf was describing, it's like the Beis HaMikdash during the blowing of the shofar. But one beautiful thing came out of last year's lockdown. We weren't actually in lockdown, but we were obviously smaller numbers. One of the beautiful things came about, and that was what we call Mivtza Shofar, going out onto the streets and to private homes and blowing shofar for people. And it was the most beautiful thing how volunteers in the community actually raised their hands, messaged their rabbis, and said, can you give me a list of homes that I could visit to blow shofar for them? And people were very, very cautious at that time. They didn't want the people coming into their properties or into their homes. It was literally standing on the street as a family or the people who were concerned, many of the older generation too. They would come out to the gate, and there was the yeshiva student or even members of our community. I had one particular case of someone who literally learnt shofar 2 months, for the first time in his life. He learned it 2 months before Rosh Hashanah because he wanted to go out and blow for people that couldn't come to shul. And he was forcing himself. And then I gave him a list of homes to visit. And he started getting nervous. He says, oh my gosh, this is getting so real. Like you're now relying on me to blow shofar for other people. And he did it. And I think it was one of the beautiful silver linings, how we empowered people in our community to go help others in hearing the mitzvah of shofar, where normally you come to shul and the rabbi or the Baal Tekeah is the one that blows. That's something to consider.
I think the real issue, the difficulty is, I mean, when it all started, my attitude was people can't come to shul. We have to take shul to them. And so that's fine. And I, if you like, could write a drosha so they could get a drosha. Whether or not it was like dropping a Panadol into somebody's mouth from the Empire State Buildings, I'm not sure, but some maybe landed. But you can write a drosha and you can send it. One of the things I did last year, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, I took the two, I suppose, main machzorim that people are using, the Art Scroll and the Jonathan Sachs, the late Rabbi Sachs's machzor, the Koran, and I went through and I sort of tried to highlight to people what they should say on the page numbers for those two machzorim. The problem with shofar is that that's something they can't do. If they don't have a shofar and they can't blow, so and the same with Arba Minim. I mean, you look in our shul, I mean, we're blessed. It's hard to find a spot doing the Hoshana, the Hakofas and so on, but nonetheless, it's not 100% of the people in the shul. It's maybe 30% who have their own Arba Minim. So it's that, for me, is the difficulty coming up, which we didn't have last year. How do we take the Yamim Noraim and the Yamim Tovim in towards people, parts that they cannot do themselves? That's and I think we may have to seek permission, in our case, from the government as to what groups are allowed and how many and where and spacing and all of that. I mean, where I live, funnily enough, I have a balcony at the back, and I do overlook a big tennis court that belongs to two wonderful Chabad families. So we could have people standing there. There's a little park near us. I could stand there sort of on the hour and blow for maybe 50 or 60 people, but there are other parks. We'd have to have permission from the government to do that.
So I'll actually haven't had a chance to brief you, but maybe we'll have a conversation here in the presence of many others. So we actually put together a little team in recent days, and we've made submissions to the government exactly in regards to this matter, to identifying what areas will we have permission to be blowing shofar, which parks, and we're going to make that available, of course, to the entire. So we're doing this as an entire community. So all the many rabbanim from different shuls, we've come together over the last couple of days. This morning I was on a 2-hour Zoom with a couple of the rabbis, and really it's going to be a unique year in a way where traditionally everybody goes to shul, but this is going to be a shul without borders. And it's going to be a Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, which I think in many ways people are going to remember more than any other Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, because it's not going to be just, which side of my grandfather, my father I sat next to, but it's going to be, I never was able to go to shul. And if you think about Pesach, for instance, where Pesach is a Yom Tov, which is L'mishpachosayim, it happens in the house, right? People sit around the Seder table, and that's in a sense the moments of Pesach. Traditionally, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur happens in the synagogues. That's where people experience Judaism on high holidays. This year, it's going to have to happen a little bit like Pesach, where we're going to have to make and empower our communities, our congregants, to be able to have what it takes to bring Yom Tov, to bring the high holidays into their homes. So in addition to, of course, having people who are blow shofar, and we're going to make zones all over Sydney where people can walk and listen to shofar, and in front of shuls there'll be somebody standing every 10 minutes blowing shofar. We also are going to be having like an entire community-based pre-Yom Tov season preparations, where every day there's going to be another rabbi who's going to blow shofar and on a video give a little vart that can help the community appreciate, how to prepare themselves. And then there's going to be a central website that's going to be released on the weekend, where every community, every shul who's doing something for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur is all going to be on that central app. So everybody in Sydney, or anybody whoever wants to tune into this, can see everything they need to know about all shuls, everything to do with Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. I just want to say, if I can, there was a beautiful story that came about at some point. I remember reading in the news of a woman whose husband had been unfortunately diagnosed with quite an early on stage of Alzheimer's, and unfortunately he was in a home, and he wasn't able to. She used to go to see him every single day, and she was with him. And of course, as soon as COVID hits, those homes get locked down and nobody can come inside. And she was feeling terrible. It was like, how is she going to go see her husband? Every month, he was losing more and more engagement with people around him. And I think the story was going around. Maybe some of the rabbis would have heard it. And eventually, she turns to the old age woman. She says, she's an accountant by practice. She says, "Is there any work that I could do for you? Because if I'm an employee, at least I can come and see my husband." Anyways, there was no work available. She comes every day and begs, "Tell me whatever I can do." Finally, after a few weeks, they tell her there's one single job available, and that is to be a dishwasher. The dishwasher, unfortunately, lives too far away; he can't come. If you want to be a dishwasher, that's the way you're going to be able to come in here. And of course, if that was the only way she was going to be able to see her husband, she gave up her accounting practice, and she became a dishwasher. And she spent literally 7 hours a day washing dishes, but she was able to come see her husband. And the moment she walked into the room to see her husband, he recognized her, even though he hadn't seen her for almost 3 months. And she talks about how she would do anything to be able to be with him, and she was so happy to be able to see that spark in his eye. And I think in many ways she reminds us about, a Yom Tov has never been like this. But I think all of us Jews have what it takes to really remake ourselves. And I hope all of us rabbis have what it takes to be able to remake our models, to be able to speak to our people so that we can make Yom Tov meaningful for each one, perhaps not in the same way, perhaps in a much more significant way, because up until now it's been very conventional. And there's a lot of Jews who don't necessarily relate to organized religion, and it's not going to be an organized religion. It's going to be a very different religion. It's going to be a religion where people are going to be able to relate to it, not necessarily with dafka coming with a minyan, with a kaddish, with this niggin and with that niggin, with the traditional rabbi's sermon. It's going to be the etzem of the essence of Judaism. And in a very deep way, I think this can be probably one of the most significant and perhaps even the most meaningful Yom Tov if it's done and if we prepare our communities in the right manner.
Over the years, when people told me that line, Rabbi, I don't like organized religion, I said, come to our shul. We're not so organized.
I think what you just said is important, because a lot of people think different is bad, but different can be better, or it can certainly be as good. One of the regulations here, and I assume you had the same thing in South Africa, regarding levayot. Fortunately, I haven't done any levayot of COVID, although I understand there have been some in the Jewish community. I asked the gravediggers a couple of days ago. But for example, the regulations here at the moment is maximum of 10, excluding the Rov and excluding the members of the Chevra Kadisha, the couple of men who come and assist. So 13 people are standing around maximum. But you know, when you think about it, you think, well, that's different and that's awful. But I can tell you from experience, some of the Levayot I've done have been so intimate and they've been so meaningful. And the people themselves, you know, it's not like somebody standing up and just going on to a whole crowd of people who don't really know the person. Here, it's the very essence of the family. And so, as I say, I think you've got to look at the positives as well. And exactly when you said that, Levi, the other thing I think is patience on our part. You know, we tend to be rather impatient as rabbis. We want to achieve so much very, very quickly. And here we've got to go really slowly because we can communicate, as you say, maybe with 30, 40 at a time, just one step at a time. But I think some of the ideas that you put forward are very, very useful. And obviously I'll see more when they get published.
Here in South Africa, in the African community, funerals are a very, very important part of life. And so we're allowed 50 at a funeral.
Wow.
And at one stage it was 100. But now the smallest is 50. So we don't struggle for a minyan. But and the Chevra Kadisha here are very organized, and they live stream it on Zoom for people who cannot make it, and for people around the world actually. But I want to come back. Yeah, we'll get.
No, Rabbi Goldman, lead the way, Rabbi Goldman.
I just wanted to broaden the conversation. Maybe we'll come back to Yom Neroim. I mean, you spoke about the grandeur of the big synagogue, and I must tell you, you know, I mean, when I started at Sydenham, there were 1,000 people in shul every Friday night. It was unbelievable. But Yontif, I mean, you walk into a packed shul on a Rosh Hashanah, on a Yom Kippur, the crescendo at the end of Ne'ilah. I mean, and I say to someone, you want to go to a shtibel with 20 people? Are you crazy? You know, Roi Vam Hadras Melech, you see the majesty of Hashem and prayer and community and communal worship. It's so powerful. At the same time, and I think this is something that our shuls perhaps have shared a success at, that even though we're both big shuls, Rabbi Levi spoke about having farbrengens. We also introduced farbrengens some years ago on a Shabbos Mevorchim. But I think we've never been a stiff, pompous, formal synagogue. You know, there was a time when the 3 Gaboim in the box wore hats. Now they've done away with that because we got younger Gaboim who suffer from an allergy to hats. But we've always tried to be personal, warm, informal. We have a nursery school, so we're really from young to old, serving all the age groups. And when Rabbi Stern joined us those years ago, he filled the gap that we were now addressing young adults, who previously were not being catered for. So we're pretty comfortable to say that we address the needs of every age group, and we're friendly, big, yes, a big shul, yes, but still friendly, informal, and one of the other things that has been a tremendous success for us, and maybe you can share what some of your tricks, is we have a group of women who have founded a chesed committee. And, you know, rabbis do hospital visiting. But now we have a chesed committee of women. If there's anyone who needs, whether it's a shiva house or someone's not well, or please God, simchas, newborn, there are meals flowing into that house for a day, for a week. People are overwhelmed, and we've had so many people who are recipients of meals from our chesed committee that they volunteered to join the chesed committee themselves because they were so appreciative and they saw what a big thing it is. So I'm just thinking of ways of taking the big shul and making it still have the friendliness and the informality of the shtibel, of the smaller shul. So maybe you can share some more of your tricks as well.
Well, I always say Rabbi Wolf knows that when he's away, I have to take the pulpit, and then I have to sit, so to speak, I'm locked into his seat. Otherwise, I'm fairly mobile, and I think one of the advantages is that I am able to move around, talk to various people. Never talk during the Rabbi's drosha. Try not to talk during Kriyas Torah. But I shocked my dear colleague Rabbi Levi, because the one time that I absolutely never say a word is during Tekir's shofar, from first Tekir to last Tekir. And I think he couldn't get over that. It was a shock to him for me to be quiet for about, how long? 2 hours, an hour and a half, 2 hours. But I always say, it's the old joke that there are two types of people that go to shul. There's Mr. Cohen, who goes to shul to speak to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and there's Mr. Levi, who goes to shul to speak to Mr. Cohen. And I think we've got to acknowledge that there is that social aspect. And at times, people want to feel that they're included. The other aspect, by the way, that you haven't particularly touched on with a large shul compared to the smaller ones, is not just the atmosphere that I think you've both described, but I'll call it the gravitas, the pull that it has. And again, I pay a tribute to my colleague, because he is really great at connecting with people in government, in the media, in the entertainment world, or in sport. We've just been getting gold medals of people that he connected with. And I think a smaller shul doesn't have that same pull or influence. And I think when Rabbi Levi calls up, I think people listen, and they want to be in central, if they're Jewish or not Jewish. It's to their advantage. And I think you get that in a shul. There's no other shul. There's no other shul. The great synagogue in Sydney, maybe in some areas, but not to the same extent that Central has achieved. And you wouldn't get that in smaller shuls at all.
I think maybe just, something which is just so obvious, but maybe sometimes overlooked. I think you just need to be really genuine and real. And I think you can't take yourself too seriously. I think old generation Rabbonim, there was this very big distance and gap between them and their congregants, maybe intentionally or maybe unintentionally. Maybe it's from the environment that I come from, but when we look at another Jew as your very own brother and sister, and when you care for them and you love them and you're genuine about it and you're genuine about yourself and you're real, I think that creates a vibe and that creates an atmosphere, and it becomes like, contagious. And when you have young people, they see through it. And one of the first things that, Chani and I, when we came to the shul 20 years ago, reflecting now, where do you start? When you have 1,000 families, where do you start? And one of the first things we did was in addition to obviously creating these personal relationships of having people come to our house before the simchas, is exactly with something which is going on till this very day. And that is creating Shabbos dinners for young people who really in many ways remain not only the future, but they automatically become the backbone of the now. And relationship building and remaining connected with people and phoning people. And, I think everybody wants to have a personal relationship, which I think is probably the hardest thing for us as rabbis, because in business, in many ways, the more successful you are, the more removed you become. You start off on the ground, you do sales, you become manager, you become, general manager, CEO, chairman. In Rabbonos, it's just the opposite. It's the more you become involved, the more they want you. And they're not going to have it without you. And because the relationship is with you. And then you start getting pulled all over the place, and you have to become a little bit wise about how to really spend your time and have that slochin zman, which is to me right now, when I daven Shemona Esrei, I ask Hashem for success and time, to being able to really make the right choices and be present at each of those moments, so that you can really give everybody what they want and be there for them. So I think it boils down, sorry for talking so much, I think it boils down to just being real, being genuine, building relationships, and people feel warm and they feel connected because that's what they're getting from you. That's what they're going to reciprocate. So it's not tricks. It's hard work, doesn't happen easy. And it takes time for people to warm up to you and to feel what you're trying to do and buy into your vision and see that what you're doing is for the benefit of the community, and they can be part of it. And really, everybody wants to feel good. And if you make them feel good about it, they come along on the journey with you.
No, we're gonna have to reschedule another whole session because we haven't gotten the Rebbitzins involved here. And in terms of really warming to people, the Rebbitzins play a huge role in teaching and challah baking and hosting and really and being friends. That's another whole area of congregational life. And I think in our two congregations, I think all the Rebbitzins of our communities are both really powerhouses in their own ways. Rochel and Esti Stern going forward really make a huge contributions, and I'm sure it's the same in Central and Sydney. But that's going to have to be for another time. What do we have time left for?
Do we have time for some questions? Do we have some time for some questions in the chat box?
Okay, let's first give Rabbi Stern a chance.
Let's see. Please do share the questions if you'd wish, or the regards. I know many people are sending regards through the chat. If you have any particular questions, please do post them. I just wanted to tell Rabbi Wolf, in response to Rabbi Wolf's last comment, we, as part of our transition that we've experienced now in the shul, it's actually been building up over the last few years, trying to guide our community into the future. As part of the rabbinic transition process, COVID was actually, it started long before COVID too. And one of the things we did was a survey in the community to see what actually people benefit from and want within a community. And we put there, the music or the shiurim or the classes or the programs and all the great things that communities come with. And one of the things that was highlighted by everybody and really stuck out was a sense of belonging to a family, to a community. More than all the programs, all the projects, is a sense of, do I belong? And the way I belong, as you mentioned, is by having that personal relationship with the rabbi, the rebbitzin, the chazan, the officials, the gaboim within a community. And that really drives me. What I think about all the time is less than the hoo-ha and the pomp and ceremony or the programs which cater for large communities. What's most important to me is he or she feeling a sense of belonging to the community? Do they feel that they're actually part of the family, of the network of the community? One of the things we've really focused on during the COVID time and lockdown has actually been our Zoom programs, which I know, Rabbi Wolf, you're leading the way there in Sydney with your Tuesday night, I think, your Tuesday night regular programs, and we've tried to do the same. And even when our shuls have gone back, and we do have our services, we're only limited to 50 or 100 or 150, how many more people are actually at home and unable to come to shul due to that? And we can't disregard or forget that. And so we've worked so hard on engaging with our people in their comfort of their homes, because they should also feel a sense of belonging to the community, even if they're not walking into the four walls of the shul. So I know you've done the same with the chazonim and with the rabbonim and with the rebbitzins, and trying to create programs to engage. That really, to me, is the driving force of a kehillah, is our people feeling a sense of belonging. And then if they are, you can build on that with the programs and projects that take us forward in that regard.
Well, Rabbi Yehuda, that's our experience, and it's interesting the way you explained it. I mean, just on a personal note, I've been running a course on a Monday night for as long as I've been involved with the shul. And the last 2 or 3 years, it's been like a history course of the Jewish people. And I was getting about 30, 40 maybe every Monday night. And then COVID came and the numbers exploded and they went up to 80 or 90 because exactly what you said, people are sitting at home and word got out and it's something they wanted to do. But what I found interesting was, as Rabbi Levi said, we're doing really well in New South Wales and then everything's reopened. So I reopened on a face-to-face basis. And of the numbers, maybe 60 or 70 by then on average, only about 20% came back. And the others were very happy sitting in their own homes. So then I had to take the computer in, and then I was talking to the 15 or 20 people in front of me, and I was speaking to the other 40 people. And I don't think, even if COVID, and I know one of the questions we were going to maybe discuss, post-COVID, how are we going to get the community back to where it was, if we want to? But certainly in terms of adult education, I can't see in the short term that we're just going to close the computers and say goodbye Zoom. This is here to stay. And it's a positive thing because we're getting people who didn't want to come to shul, didn't want to get in the car on a cold and wet evening in the winter or a too hot, balmy evening in the summer. So Rabbi, you had a very, very interesting, your experience I think is parallel.
Very good point. And maybe just to add to that, one of the other things is I think COVID has taught us to really chaparayim. It was interesting because, some people, you push things off, you think it's going to be, it's going to reopen up soon. So we might as well wait till that happens. And all of a sudden, obviously there's other plans and right, the things that you could have done or you should have done have very quickly, plans have changed. And I remember, I speak from the experience I've had. Our daughter, our eldest daughter, Mushka, this is at the beginning of COVID. This is March 2020. And she was meant to get married in April. And all of a sudden we realized that, things were changing. And we just quickly made the call and flew into California at the time. And unfortunately, both of our parents couldn't, my wife's parents, my parents couldn't be there. And we had the wedding. And I look back at the time, first of all, going back to our first point earlier, sometimes small things are very significant, very powerful, very, very uplifting because, there's nothing else but the essence of what's happening. But had we not have done it then, who knows how long you would have had to wait. And I think it's a good lesson in life, to chaparayim, to really seize a moment. Don't push things off. What are you pushing it for? For what? What's going to happen so much better later that can't be done now the way things currently are? So, I mean, there are so many silver linings. Of course, nobody should ever have to experience the challenges that sadly so many people have had to go through and endure. But there are so many beautiful things that have come out. And the strength that the communities have learned, and the lessons that we've taken away, and the connection, and the family, and looking after one another. I mean, there's never been a time that people have looked after one another more in our community than during times like this. So, anyways, it's 7:13, which means we're already 13 minutes after we were meant to finish. But it looks like we still have well over 175 devices on connected. If there are any good questions, more than happy to answer. But I want to take the opportunity to thank Rabbi Goldman and Rabbi Stern on behalf of Rabbi Friedman and myself and the many from Sydney and many in Johannesburg and around. I can see Halsey here from Melbourne listening, and I can see people beyond just our two communities that are on tonight. So thank you for joining.
Maybe, sorry to interrupt you. I can't see everybody, but I can see Helen, and she had her hand up. She wanted to ask something. But there you are.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Wolf, for including me tonight. I just want to say that you all have given so many great positive energy about what should happen in shuls. For those of you who don't know me, I was the only woman president of the Doncaster community, and we had hundreds of South African families coming in, and we changed the whole dimensions of the shul, which worked well. What I wanted to say to you, and Levi knows me so well, when my husband died suddenly 12 years ago, Levi and I knew each other, and he really reached out to me. because I'm by myself, and it was a big shock. And I think that during COVID times in Melbourne, particularly the last 18 months, most of us couldn't go to shul. I attend Chabad Malvern, and it's been closed. And last year, Yontif was dreadful because I was home by myself. And Rabbi Shimshon and Rivka of Malvern did, Levi, exactly what you said tonight. They reached out, and it's a relationship between me and them. And I think most of my friends, they're not that keen to go back to shul. They like davening at home. Why? Because the rabbi and Rebbitzin, we all became friends, closer. We have a WhatsApp group. We're on it all the time, the group of people at shul. So I think what you said, Levi, touched me the most, that rabbis today, like you all believe, have to be involved with your balabatim. And that's what makes it successful. It's not the building, although I love Central the best, shul building in Australia, but I think reaching out to people and you become part of a family. And that's what I think our Jewishness is all about.
Helen, please send regards to Ruvi and Menucha as well at Malvern. Okay?
I will, 100%.
I spoke there when I was there a few years ago.
I know. I know. They do great work. And the senior Rabbi Rabin, who was at Northeastern and now South Caulfield, has just been appointed Rabbi of Caulfield Shul and starts in November, and he's 39. And he and his wife are beyond dynamic. And for those of you who don't know him, you'll meet him.
That's another of the products of South Africa benefiting the Australian community. There you go.
Sorry?
Another of the South African products benefiting the Australian community. There you go.
Yeah.
Many of his family members were in our shul, and he's a graduate of the Torah Academy schools
but
here.
Actually, Caulfield Shul have been very clever. They've appointed a rabbi and a rebbitzin, like you, Levi, is with Honey, but they appointed them both to the role, right? Because she's very dynamic and she's not dissimilar to Honey, but you know, that sort of personality, and people are obsessed by them. Why? Because of their knowledge? Probably. Because of their looks? Definitely. But more important, that they reach out to us. And I'm lucky enough to be his mentor. And he and she are dynamite. And
Agreed. And here too, Rachel has been very busy, and Esti is going to play a big role with the ladies in our community going forward as well. That's one of the things of COVID I didn't enjoy, is all the many new WhatsApp groups I had to get involved with. So I hope COVID will end soon, so I don't have to be on so many WhatsApp groups.
It's a good way of communicating.
How do we wrap this up, guys? We'll do it again, eh?
We'll wrap this up by saying, I think we have the Sussmans want to say something? Go ahead, unmute yourself.
Hold on one second. I'll tell you what we're going to do. 1 second here. Okay, you can unmute yourself now. Go ahead. No, 1 second. No, unmute yourself. Unmute yourself before you start speaking. We're not hearing you.
You can't hear me?
Now we can.
Can you hear me? If you don't mind me addressing a couple of words to Rabbi Yossi Goldman and to Rabbi Yehuda Stern, for those of us who were lucky enough to view the transition of the Rabbonim, of the rabbis, a very emotional experience, and believe me, the tears flowed when we watched it, and I'd like to take this opportunity, Yehuda, of wishing you the very, very best of luck. And to Rabbi Goldman, I'm sure I'm talking on behalf of the entire Synagogue community for what you have done for your community. Thanks are just no words available. So Yossi, to you, I say thank you, the best of luck, and what a wonderful idea to get 4 of the best Rabbonim together on Zoom. Well done, and we're looking forward to the next one. Thank you.
Well, Well, I was confused because it says Denise Sussman, but
That's
it's
right.
Bensi Jaffe. Hello, Bensi.
Hello, Rabbi Yossi. I'm talking on Denise's computer.
Wonderful to see you. Don't confuse me next time.
Thank you. I won't. Thank you.
Bensi, you're speaking from Melbourne. Where are you speaking from?
From Sydney.
Sydney. Amazing. Thank you. Thank you for your wishes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. The best of luck.
Well, if we're wrapping up, I just want to say we shouldn't forget that people are missing shul, but they're also missing a lot of other things. And you can see behind me, that's the 17th hole at Long Reef Golf Club, and I'm over 10 kilometers away. And our rule is you cannot go to your recreation if you're further than 10 kilometers. So if the shul had a gym, I could go to shul, but I can't go to my golf club. So it's a real nebuch.
You guys are stricter than we are. Thank God our golf courses and tennis clubs are open, wide open.
That's an idea for you, Levi. If we just put a gym in the shul, I think we can go there for exercise, yeah? Maybe Linda's watching. You've got to think about these things.
Rabbi Wolf, I just want to thank you because you've been very helpful. Before we wrap up, you and I have been in touch about our young adults events, in particular the Friday night dinners with the celebrities and guest speakers. And you've given me a lot of time over these years, sharing your ideas with me over the phone. We never had Zoom meetings 5-10 years ago, but nonetheless, your ideas have been amazing. Bringing young people into a large community is always a bit tricky. And thank you for your mentorship. You're thanking Rabbi Goldman for his mentorship. I thank you for your mentorship in giving us some of the tricks of the trade. And please God, we should always grow the communities despite the challenges, COVID being one of them. We have a big responsibility, and together as a partnership between ourselves with the members of our community, we should be prosperous and successful into the future.
Thank you.
Rabbi Yehuda, can I give you one of Rabbi Levi's tricks that he's probably too modest to talk about? I have never, ever worked with anyone, certainly not a Rav, who displays and genuinely has so much patience and tolerance. I don't have it. He does. I admire it and I try and learn from it. So if he hasn't spoken to you about it, just let it come to you and just let it go by, and tomorrow be great. He's amazing like that. So there you are. That's from Rabbi Wolf without him even speaking.
Fantastic.
Rabbi Friedman, you're making me blush, and I'm going to put you on mute in a moment if you continue like
I'll put myself.
Rabbi Stern, I'm just going to finish off by saying, to paraphrase the famous Rabbi Akiva, Shali v'shalcha shaloi hu. Both what I have, and because of that, the little bit that I was able to give to you, I owe to Rabbi Goldman, who did not only mentor me 1997, 24 years ago, but over the years, I remember in Perth, keeping him on the phone late into the night as well, to Rabbi Goldman, to Rabbi Tzirachul, and to the many, and to everybody here. The communities are what they are because of not only the Rabbonim and the Rebbitzins, the communities are because of the wonderful congregants. And we wish you all, on behalf of the other three Rabbonim here, a year filled with blessings in a revealed way for each and every one of you. For those of you who unfortunately need to have it for Shalema, they should be blessed with health and with strength. Those who need comfort. I think a rabbi was once asked, what is a real Rav? And he said it's to bring comfort to those who are disturbed and to disturb those who are a little bit too comfortable. So that's what we try to do. We try to bring comfort to those who need and are disturbed. And we try to, kvetch and pinch and make uncomfortable those who need to be, who are a little bit too comfortable on the 17th hole. So therefore, we want to wish you all and we will definitely, hopefully Rabbi David and Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda will join me as well. We'll do this again after Yom Tif, and we'll say Reflections of Yom Tif 5782. If we're not in Yerushalayim, find us on Zoom. God bless you, and I look forward to being able to see you. Can I just do a quick plug and an advert? And this is for my South African friends as well. For the first time in history of Australia, the High Court, the Australian Supreme Court, has appointed not only a Frum Yid, but a rabbi to the bench. The very first judge on the Supreme Court of Australia is now a very dear friend who is actually involved with bringing me down to Perth, Rabbi Marcus Solomon. He will be talking on Wednesday evening, a fascinating and inspirational talk about how Judaism never holds one back, but actually enables you to become who you are. I was laughing with him, and I told him that today on the bench of the Supreme Court in Australia, there are more people with smicha than on the High Court in Israel. So there you go. Something very special. Look forward, if you'd like to join us, 8 o'clock on Central Synagogue ID Zoom. Before then, there's Monday night classes, Tuesday night classes, I'm sure, in all of our communities. Thank you for joining us. All the very best.
Thank you.
God bless you all.
Thank you. It's been a wonderful experience for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Lovely to talk to you.
And Rabbi Wolf, it's a nachas to me to see that you can now mentor many other rabbis. God bless you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay safe and well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Night.